Yeah, so thanks a lot, everyone, for being here to take a look and learn some more about the artwork we have on display. You know, this is part of the educational function of the space is to invite the artists to talk, especially to painting students, but to all students about and the wider community about the art, because I think that one of the things that happens a lot is that people go to museums and they have questions, and they go to galleries and they have questions, and the artist isn't there to ask them. And so I think it's really good to have an opportunity to speak directly to the artist and find out, you know, from them directly what was the thinking behind their work, what was the impetus for the things that they do, and technically how do they do it. I think all those kinds of questions are valid and good. So we're really lucky. We've got here a wonderful collection of paintings by a former Patrick and Henry Community College student, Roz Waiwaiole. I think I had my first class with her in 2010, I think. She came a long route because she's a native of Hawaii, and she is a person who has lived many lives. She's done a lot of different things, and around 2010 she found herself here, and she took some art classes, and she had some background in art already. I think she had run an art gallery before that.
I had done, yeah.
And so we worked together for a couple of years, 2 years or so. She worked with me, and then she went on to Hollins University and got a bachelor's degree in studio arts, studying painting and drawing and maybe other things she can tell you about. She studied with another Martinsville native. Why is her name jumping out of my head right now? I can't believe her name. I know her so well. Her name just jumped out of my head.
Who is that? Martinsville native?
With the Venetian.
Oh, Allison Hall.
Allison Hall, right? So and Allison had a show here many years ago, and so you worked with Allison, and you also probably worked with maybe Bill White or
I missed Bill White, but I did have Allison, who was one of my painting instructors. Yeah, professors there at Hollins. Yeah.
Right, and then so you finished up with your bachelor's degree at Hollins, and then has gone on to do other things. Currently, you live in Arkansas. And so she has come all the way back here, not just today, but she came all the way back here to deliver and install her paintings, and then she made a trip back to talk to us today. So she has really gone above and beyond the duty of sharing her work with us. I'm really impressed with this work. I've seen it develop over the years since after she left here, and it just keeps getting better and better and more interesting. And these, as many people have noted, are really existing on this edge between representational landscape and pure abstraction, and it's really a very interesting place to be, right on that edge. So
I love that edge.
so I want to welcome Roz. I want to ask you all to warmly welcome Roz to our school.
Thank you. Thank you. It is so wonderful to be back. I mean, I have wonderful memories, and Jerry's been absolutely wonderful professor. And then I have another professor, Terry, Mr. Terry there, and for history. And it's been just great to be back. I love Virginia, and I do miss it. And I brought my sister with me. She's somewhere hiding behind the pillar there. She's never been to Virginia, so I've been showing her the area, and she's loving it. I have always, as Jerry said, I've always been in art. In high school, I was in the art department. That was my spot. That was my hiding place. It's always my sanctuary. My studio is my sanctuary. It's where art for me is meditation. When I'm working, I'll have my music on, just don't bother me. I'm in a different realm. I don't know what time it is. I'm not good with time anyway, except for going to work or anything like that. But I just try to focus on what I'm doing. This body of work, and I still am working on, I'm extending it. My work is getting more abstract in a way. I love that line. Jerry was saying there's that edge, right, of abstraction and representation, and this is as close to realism as I get. Because I find abstraction a lot more interesting for me. It poses a lot more questions. So the artist Georgia O'Keeffe, I'm sure you know of her work. The first time I looked at her work, I was looking at it, I'm like, well, it's wonderful. And then she had a painting that two blue lines. What does two blue lines do for you when you look at her work? There were just two blue lines. I'm like, oh my God, what is she thinking? You know, and the color was just beautiful, how she blended those colors, how they interconnected. And that just got me, because for me, abstraction poses a lot more questions. I can go to a gallery, I can look at work and go, ah, you know, a beautiful masterpiece, and go, that's gorgeous, you know, or a portrait, and I'm looking, and technically it's lovely, but then the questions stop. For me, the questions stop. When I'm looking at a piece, if you're looking at one of my pieces, you'll see this line, what was she thinking about that? It reminds me of, it goes back to your own history, to the viewer's own history, right? How they're going to relate to that piece. My work is on birch cradle. I tend to really like birch cradle, especially because I use Venetian plaster on some of my work. And I also work with oil and cold wax. I tend to love that medium. I love the texture that it gives. And the quantity of wax pertaining to the quantity of oil paint. How many of you are in oil painting, are taking painting classes? We had classes together. I'm very happy to see her today. How are you liking that? Do you like oils, or do you like acrylics? Those who are painters, which would you prefer? Or do you like both? You like both? What was that?
You only use one, right?
Yeah, we will only use
That you'll only use
Some
oil
people
here,
have-
but some people have used acrylics. I tend to use acrylics in a different medium because I also do mixed media, rip and tear paper with, you know, with cold wax and things of that sort. But I love oils. I always go to oils. There's something about the oil paint. I don't know if it's the smell of the oil. I'm sure I have cadmium in here somewhere because I've used so much of it. But I love the way it moves. I love the way it goes on my canvas or on the cradle or mixing it with. I just have this love relationship, I think, with that. These pieces, contemporary landscapes, growing up in Hawaii, it's just so beautiful. The landscapes are gorgeous. And then when I've moved to the mainland, I've traveled to so many places. And even driving here from Arkansas, going through Tennessee, which is such a long state, and then you hit North Carolina. And there's specific areas, if you're really paying attention, even going from Virginia to North Carolina, the light changes. There's a certain spot, the light changes, and it never fails. I'll be going and I'll go, the light just changed, you know? So I'm always looking. I mean, driving by, you'll see I have several that have these beautiful gold fields, and then driving in Tennessee. I'm driving and I'm like, it's changing. Look at that field. And I'm just constantly looking at that landscape. And there's something about the horizon line because I want to know what's over there. How far back does it go? You know, what is over there? It's like a bridge. What's over there? So I'm always connecting, you know. I don't know,
Well, do you find that people will be really surprised if they pay a little more attention to the colors that are out there? Because I think people kind of, something I say a lot about, people think they know things without looking at them. Like people just say, well, fields, like a farm fields are green, but they're not.
They're not.
Sometimes they're green,
Yes.
but they're only green in certain times of the year and in certain light.
Right.
Right? And so that's a major thing that changes.
Yes, most definitely. I love that convergence of color.
Right, so people are surprised sometimes, like, if I can, we actually were talking about these paintings the other day, and this group, especially this group of four more rather abstract ones, and the purple one, and someone asked about what kind of landscape would that be that could be purple? But you know, what was funny, when I pressed a little bit more on that, was that Eva? Was that you? You asked about that, but you asked about it, but then you answered it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And what was?
What did you say?
Like a field of like lavender flowers.
Correct.
So the thing that's really interesting is that you answered it, you like asked the question, but then you're like, well, yeah, that could be. At first you're like, well, that's not natural, but then yes, it could be natural. And that goes back to your point about questions.
Right.
About how maybe representational painting answers questions and abstract painting asks questions.
It does. It poses a lot more questions for me. How many of you like abstract work? And why is that?
It tends to be more like fun.
I'm sorry?
Like you have more like freedom to paint and like more creativity.
Yes.
It just, like, looks cool
Yeah.
to me.
And I feel that if the viewer, say you were up here looking at that piece, you're actually having a conversation with it, and you're having a dialogue with it, and you're looking at it, and you're kind of thinking in your mind, why would she do that? Where would that be? Things of that sort. If you're having a conversation and a dialogue with one of my paintings or any painting, then that painter has done their job, I feel. Because my experience and what I would put down may be totally different than yours. I want you to be engaged in the piece and come up with your own thought process.
Engagement, that's a great word for that, because as you said, sometimes you can look at a representational piece and you can appreciate it, but once all the questions are answered, well then the engagement's done.
Yeah.
Because once you know everything, it's not really done completely, because there's other things that you can get into, like technical matters and how a person might solve a particular problem. And there are things, but there's more openings.
A lot more openings.
In abstract.
Yeah, most definitely.
And I want to, I think you mentioned several technical things that I wanted to just get at. So birch cradle, that's solid birch wood on a kind of a frame background.
So I'm going to take this off here, because I can't. So it's just a little cradle, and this is what we call it. And then there's a thin piece of birch that's attached to that cradle.
So that's a solid surface rather than a canvas that's more flexible.
Right.
And that allows you to be, well, it puts up a different resistance to the paint than flexible fabric.
Right.
Now, a lot of you guys are still painting on canvas board, which is also kind of a stiff thing, but a lot of times people paint on canvas so the resilience of that, or the solidness of that, pushes back against your work, your physical work on the surface.
Because if I'm doing oil, if I'm doing it on Venetian plaster, you need something heavy. You cannot use Venetian plaster on canvas. It's way too heavy. And it may look really light, but there is actually, I have some, and they actually have at least 6 to 8 layers of Venetian plaster. So it's very, very thin. I put it on really thin, sand it, so it's very time consuming when I'm doing that. Also, if I'm painting with oil and cold wax, I can do that on canvas, but I have to watch the ratio of wax to the paint.
So
does that make
just
sense
to slow
at all?
you down a little bit, so Venetian plaster is something that people are probably not familiar with. So what Venetian plaster is just a kind of plaster that's very fine.
It is very fine. And you can actually make it using marble dust, but I choose not to do that just because I'd have to wear apparatus and I don't want to breathe that in. And so I do use one that's manufactured and it's made by Valspar, and Lowe's carries that product. It comes in a gallon and it is rather pricey, but it's already mixed for you. And I tend to use that, and that works.
That's what we call a ground. Mm-hmm. It's a ground that, because oil paint shouldn't be put directly onto bare wood or bare canvas. And so the white that you have when you're stretched canvases, that's a barrier. And actually that has some plaster in it. That's what gesso is,
right,
which is a paint made with plaster. And the plaster forms a layer between the oil paint and the wood or canvas.
And the canvas.
And so, but Venetian plaster, the nice thing about it is that after several layers, it's a beautifully smooth, very fine-grained surface. So you don't have the weave of the canvas, and you don't have you don't have the grain of the wood. Nothing shows through. It just becomes a really uniform.
It's just,
smooth.
and it's beautiful. It's so soft and it's so smooth. But that's with you sanding it. Now, if I wanted to leave some texture, I could with that, right? You can build texture with that. But I choose not to do that because I love that smoothness of it. Also, oil paint takes a lot of time to dry usually. It takes a longer period to dry. Venetian plaster, the plaster absorbs the oil. And so it's really nice to work with. And it's just, it's just delicious. That's all I'm saying. That's my word for Venetian plaster is delicious.
And then you also use cold wax medium, which is a medium that you can purchase that mixes well with oil paint. Oil and wax tend to mix okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's well, I guess there's some kind of gel medium that can be used with, it's not the same though.
So the gel medium would be used, I would use that more with acrylic.
Right. But so the wax is like a paraffin wax that's semi-liquid at room temperature.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So
it's like frosting.
Like frosting. Mm-hmm.
It is, it's like frosting. And you mix it with your paint. On a birch cradle, I can go up to 50-50 if I choose to. I tend to also use the rule lean to fat when I'm painting. So when I'm first putting when I'm first going ahead and starting my painting process, I do not add any oil. I do not add any wax. I tend to use that after a couple of passes. And that way I can build up my texture if I choose to do that.
And we do that with the way I instruct you to use oil paint, which is to start with very thin paint and slowly use less and less turpentine to get to thicker paint. And that there is this painting adage, either fat over lean or lean to fat, meaning how thin the paint is to thicker paint. Because of the speed of drying, fat, thick paint dries slower than thin paint. So you want the thinner paint to dry faster before the thick, because if you do it the other way around, you get cracks and things.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well. And also working with wax, it does speed up your drying time. You know, it's in a couple days, it's pretty much dry because you've got that wax.
And it also allows you to deal with texture and scratch back in, because you're building up layers of paint that have some density that you can then actually physically work into.
Right, yeah. So like these here, I have several layers of paint underneath that before I get to the top, and then I can go ahead, once it's done, I can go ahead and scrape away. I can add two and scrape away again on some of these.
Achieve a color that you couldn't achieve directly. Well, like the one behind you is a really good example, because the red that's there is not on the surface. The red is buried underneath, under the green. And it's only exposed because you scratch back into the green and the red comes out.
Yeah.
And that's a really good use of layering, and also well, it can be intuitive, but it also can be somewhat planned to put that red down, knowing you're going to cover it, but also knowing you're going to expose it again later.
Yeah, yeah. And so there are several. I have yellow ochre in there that I really like. I love yellow ochre. It's one of my favorite colors to use. But you never know what you're going to get. And that's what I really like. You never know what you're going to get. I paint with a palette knife. Every once in a while I may have a brush because I may want to just go ahead and blend something in a little bit more, but I paint with palette knife. I tend to love that. I'm a tactile person too, so I like and scraping, and then I scrape it off, and then I add more, you know, and it's all experimenting. And don't be afraid to experiment. And don't be afraid to go, gosh, this doesn't look good. I mean, I have, you know, scraped off canvases, regesseled the canvas, and redone it, you know, and I think every painter has done that. But don't be afraid to just experiment. And a lot of my work is intuitive, I think. I may have a thought, oh, I drove by there, and I think it has that. So, and I've used photographs. I have a friend that went to Oregon and brought photographs back. And so those three in the middle there, she had two of the dunes, right? And I was like, gosh, I've got that cradle. I think I want to break it down. And so I just broke it down even more so to be more abstract. And it works really well.
And I remember this kind of imagery goes really something that you were attracted to really from the first time I met you, because I take some pride in the fact that some of this was inspired from New Jersey, which people don't think about as being a real landscape-oriented place, but it has its places.
It does. Because I believe I went to the area where you're from, and I spoke to you about that. And I just, you know, I'm like, oh, look at that, look at that. And then I just, you know, if I don't have my camera or whatever, it's like it's in there. I love going to Maine. So blueberry barrens, it's right behind Professor Terry, those four. When they're in bloom, it's red. And the barrens are like that. And you've got limestone rocks that are everywhere. And I've gone through those blueberry barrens, blueberries, because they're like right there. They're tiny and they're so good. And so hiking through there, you know, but it does. And sometimes I'm looking at an image, or someone will shoot me an image, and I'll go, I kind of remember that. Let me double check, and I'll look at an image and find that. So I have a piece here. This is from an artist, Megan Chapman, and she's from Fayetteville, a friend of mine, and she now lives in Scotland. And she goes on her walks all the time in Scotland. And she's, you know, posts, and I looked and I went, can I paint that, Megan? She goes, oh, please do. I always ask. And I love that piece, you know. And then I was somewhere in Arkansas, usually going up. There are a couple here. My sister lives in Wesley, which is about maybe 20 minutes away from where I live, and there are these open fields. And so I went, look at that. And the way the light hit it, it was really very light, pale greens. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to add it with it. It works really well. But they're more abstract than the one from Megan. But all of that is oil and cold wax. So I just kind of use, do you know, there's a Professor Salloway at Hollins, and she takes photographs all the time, and she went somewhere, and she just had a photo, and I went, oh, I think I'm going to change that, though. I changed a couple of things up, and this was one of the pieces that I changed up that she had sent, you know, that she had, and I went, I'm going to use that, but I'm changing it up some.
See, this is something that I come back to a lot, and is that I think that there's kind of three strands of input for a painting, and I don't just agree or disagree, but what I'm hearing from you kind of sounds like the way I think about it is that you have your subject, your exterior subject matter. Your exterior subject matter is one thread of input into your painting. And you look at it and you gather from it. And then another thread is you, what you want to do to it, you know, and that comes in a lot of forms from the fact of like framing or editing or cropping the view that you want, or choosing the objects or choosing the subject, and then how you want to present it, compose the picture, etc. But there's a third strand that happens while you're working, and that is the painting starts to say what it needs.
Yep.
And you know, this is something that happens probably later in development, but you kind of have three things that you reconcile. There's a desire to somehow represent the external idea. There's a way to comment on it, what you want to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you start to compose the picture starts to be like, well, but this really actually, you know, needs to be read, or there needs to be something there different than what you thought of, or than what was in the original subject.
Yes.
And so sort of combining those three things
Yeah.
is often what it comes to.
Yeah, because once I'm working, I have that general idea, and then I go, yeah, but I feel like, and so that's where your intuitive part, I think, comes in, where that's taking you, because you may have an idea. It's like anything, you draw something out, and then, you know, it's not going to look like that because it ends up looking totally different, right? Or some changes that you've made. It's moved, it's progressed in some way, shape, or form. But that is very true. I find that a lot. Any questions?
Yeah, let's go with questions. So
I'd like to hear some questions.
I tricked you on, had you come up here, or at least many of you, to come up here and think about questions, and then I had you
Oh.
questions, and now they have questions, and they can't
Oh,
escape them. So
okay, they can't escape. Oh,
So Mary, what was your question?
there won't be a test, I promise. I've always, you know, I was really young, and so of course I would play. I remember being really young doing the paint by numbers, and I would be like in there for hours. Then I, of course, couldn't go by just what the numbers had. I had to do my own thing. And so I've always dabbled in it, but I really didn't do a lot with it until I came here. Because I've never really done that, but I'd like to learn. And so really it wasn't until I got here that I really got into painting and really looking at images and going to galleries and looking and going, how did they do that? How did they do that? And then I've just built it from there. So
mixed.
you like painting? Yeah, oh, not sure. Yeah, there are a lot of different mediums. I mean, painting is just one, you know, medium. I have friends that draw really well, and I'm like, do that, you know. Or they say, oh, you're an artist? Oh, you'll do a portrait? I'm like, yeah, not all artists can do portraits, you know. This is just my niche, and you'll find your niche if you choose to pursue that. Yeah.
Brianna, you have some questions?
Yeah, I feel like you've answered all mine, but how long does it take to paint one of the bigger paintings?
The 12 by 12s? Yeah. It depends on how many layers, really. I try to let that dry pretty well. Sometimes I wait not till it's fully dried, and I add another color because I want those colors to merge. If I'm one that doesn't sleep very well, so usually 2 o'clock I'm awake, and I feel like that's when something's channeling me. And if I'm in the studio, I can finish that out in pretty close to a day. But I'm just working. But I put it onto the side, so I'm not just working on one piece either. So if I'm working on a series, I have 4 things set up. I'm like, okay, I have an idea. I'm prepping them all. I'm doing that. And then I just work on one, let that dry while I have an idea for another one. So it depends. Sometimes they go really quickly. I'm like, I'm done? Wait, I'm done? Yeah.
But you'll often have more than one going at the same time. You work on that, let that dry, work on this, bring that up to this one.
Or I'm prepping others. I'm taping, you know, and getting things ready for the next one. Or another idea of another group of work that I want to work on. So I'm, this one I did, this one here, I did right before I got here. And that was fun. I just tried some other techniques using plastic bags to create color, you know. It was, yeah, it was great. I had such, I'm like, oh, okay, plastic bag. Oh, I have a little brayer. I'm
Were
just
you
gonna,
pressing it into it?
yeah, I just lay it, use a little brayer, pull it up. Oh,
And
and
the wrinkles create
Mhm.
texture?
yeah. And it turned out, I was like, how do I create, I just wanted this soft kind of look. And how do I create like little, well, I created little stones, which I call them little stones. Little pieces of, you know, rock, using that. So it's kind of, it's really kind of neat to just experiment and try new things. Other people do, you know, some things, but I'm normally the scraper, but I thought, I think I'm gonna try that. And I really like the way that turned out. So I have a couple others that I'm working on, but I go over it. It's more than once.
Before you did that? Was there already an image before you did that?
There was a bit of an image, rough. It was rough. And then I went ahead and added more color, and I'm like, I think I like the way this is looking. And I really like it. It's soft,
Yeah.
you know, and where could that be? It could be anywhere.
Looks a little bit.
Looks like the dunes, right? Or if you're taking a little walk through a path, got some overgrown, you know, yeah. So I like that.
Do you have any?
I have one, but I kind of lost.
I'm sorry.
Do you have anything?
And you're a painter.
Well, not really. I like to paint though.
You like
It's
to
fun.
paint. It is fun. It is fun. I felt very challenged taking Jerry's class in painting. You know, he'd have all the, you know, the different still lifes, right? Oh, you're gonna paint this. Oh, okay. You know, how do I do that?
Well,
But it was so wonderful.
So how, I know that, I think Harry, you had a question about that, about, you know, there's the way you paint, and you were a student of mine, but also, but not just of mine, of other people
Of
too.
other people too.
And I think maybe an interesting thing would, because I have a way of trying to teach people, and that may seem really disconnected from this. So I think maybe Harriet's question was about like how do you go from there to there? And like what was I don't know exactly what your question was, but it had to do with how a class like the way I teach it is going to help or inform you to become a painter who paints very differently.
I think it was a really great basic class for me, really to get in there and to learn some of the techniques and learn some of those basics and rules. Because even though you're painting and I may do something abstract, there's still those specific rules. You know, we do try to break the rules and stretch the rules a little bit. But I've always taken quite a bit from what Jerry has taught. And then when I went to Hollins, I had Allison Hall, totally different painter, different way of looking at things. And it's really kind of interesting to put these, and they all fit. It all comes together and it all fits. And some way, shape, or form, you create your own out of using that. One of the things that I really appreciated with my professors when I was in school, they did not expect you to paint the way they painted. They wanted you to use your own expression. What the techniques and things that they taught you, but use your own expression. It's your voice. You're using that medium. It's your creation. And that I really appreciated because I have seen some professors, well, no, you have to do it like this and you have to do it like that. But you're taking that away from that person and their expression, creative expression. And so I was very lucky not to have that.
Even from me?
Even from you. Go figure.
Oh, did you?
I didn't have a question as much as a comment. The bottom left square really looks like the Blue Ridge Mountains.
That is a Blue Ridge series.
If you go up the mountains now, you wouldn't recognize them. They are taking the mountains completely out. Moving my way. It is so depressing. So
Yep.
I think that almost made me cry because
Oh.
it's something that I'll hold dear to my heart.
Oh. Yeah. They call it progress with a two-edged sword. Yeah. Yeah. I just had fun, and I love the Blue Ridge. It's gorgeous, and we're driving. I was telling my sister, I said, there's part of the Blue Ridge, isn't it great? And I said, and the mountains change, the colors change all the time. And I remember going down the Blue Ridge, and it was a certain time of day, and light plays a great big part in color, and the mountains were in indigo, but you could see a little bit of purple, just a tad. And I was like, I'm in the car going, look. I think we live in a beautiful planet. It's our responsibility to take care of it, and we really need to appreciate the beauty that's around us. And so I do that on any of my travels. I'm always looking, whether it be the ocean, mountains, the plains, it all has beauty. And I love to interpret that.
Avery, you got something?
How do you transform like realistic landscapes into like your own like kind of abstract work? Because like I was looking at this one the other day, I'm pretty sure it's like a city. Yeah, because of the power lines and stuff, but I can't exactly make out what exactly anything else is besides just the power lines, and I think that's really interesting.
That's an intuitive painting. I've traveled some real dark, a lot of dirt and all, and then in the background you see the faint, clouds, mist, or whatever. There's not really anything. This is just a natural environment, and how that's in the background, way, farther back. That was an intuitive piece. It was just an older piece. I was really interested in the color, actually, is what I was. Sometimes that's really the most important thing to me, is how those colors merge and create, and scraping and texture. What does it mean to you aside from seeing that? Or is that all you see?
That's pretty much all I
That's
see.
all you see? So you didn't take a look at the bottom?
I tried to, and I tried to make it out, but it's just one solid mass, so I'm like, okay, this is probably just the ground.
It is the ground. It is the ground, yeah. But my thought process on that is, I love the background. I have done some work that's very minimal, where it's just an outline of something or building in the back. Because I don't want that to be in the background. But I want people to be up there, and I want them to see the colors and what is in the ground. Because the ground isn't just one color, is it? So it's got these yellow ochres, I've got some blues and reds, and some grays in there, which is kind of like the ground, right? When you're looking at dirt, you've got a lot of different colors. So, yeah.
Well, also I think, Avery, maybe we're kind of getting at how do you decide to move away from the representational or something?
Yeah.
How do you, some of them you leave very representational, but then others you
Or not.
push it
I push it back.
further and
Kind of getting.
minimize it to, I guess what it would, in the words of other artists, to get down to the essential. That's what Matisse used to say.
Yeah.
Eliminate the extraneous and emphasize the essential.
Right.
And then you do that long enough, or you take that thoroughly enough, you end up with very little actual representation. Like you end up where there's not very much left, because what is essential is that horizon.
Is that horizon, yeah. And so it brought what you were saying. So the job I have is I'm a lead art instructor for a nonprofit called Lifestyles. And my clients are, I teach clients with developmental disabilities. And so I run their art department, which is wonderful, wonderful. And breaking things down for them is pretty essential. But I also teach them art history and the artists. So when you were talking about breaking it down, it just made me think also about P.A. Mondrian, right? Wonderful artist, and he broke things down to lines and primary colors. right? He went from these beautiful paintings down to just basic. And I think that's what I tried to do.
That's a really amazing art. If you look at Piet-Mondrian, I don't know if you're familiar with Piet-Mondrian, but he's very famous for these big square shapes with dark black grids, and then one will be blue block, and another will be like a yellow block and a red block. He only uses red, yellow, and blue, and gray. Well, everybody thinks that they're white, yellow, and blue, but they're not. They're very carefully controlled shades of gray.
Yeah.
But if you look at his whole arc of his career, he started with, first of all, he produced a lot of incredibly realistic drawings that you can watch it break down and become more and more abstract. So he went from landscape painting that is gorgeous.
Yes.
And it gets a little abstract, sort of impressionistic, and then it just keeps breaking down and breaking down and breaking down, those famous tree paintings, and then it eventually leads to these where he has super reduced things to bare essentials.
Just line.
And they look pretty simple, his later compositions, but if there are lots of photographs of his work in progress, and he'll like move a line an inch, and he'll move this one up 3 inches, and move this one over a half an inch, and just he constantly worked with that process.
Yeah.
Anyway, abstracting the whole.
So it just made me think of that, just because I've been teaching that class and they're in the process of doing their paintings and things like that. But yeah, and I love that he went through that impressionistic period and was really, he's like, that's something totally new. They're using color differently, they're using the brushstroke differently, they're painting outside, they're doing all of this, and then does the tree, and then he brings it all down. So I tend to move in that direction. And I don't know why I move in that direction. It's just very interesting to me because for me it poses a lot more questions.
Okay,
They all stole my questions.
I stole your question. You got any other? How would you have?
The same thing.
Is there a painting that you specifically like, or which one's that?
The city one.
You like the city one? So what do you like about that one? You can get up. It's good. In the person. It's good.
No, I like the power lines in the city that you can like kind of barely see, and you can't really see it from like over here.
Okay. Good.
Emily, you got it?
What's the hardest painting you've ever done?
Hardest.
The hardest painting? Oh, goodness. You know, still lifes are very hard. I enjoy them, but they're very hard. I remember, so I remember this, it was in Professor Banner's class, and I was so intimidated because he has a piece of fabric that is red with this Hawaiian print, just little hibiscus flowers, right? And he sets it up, he goes, okay, and you're gonna do this one, and I went, huh? You know, because I'm like, I have to get everything really perfect, and I'm trying really hard. That was so difficult, I was so stressed out. It turned out great, but when I'm looking at my pieces from before, and learning how to paint and blending and all, and then I'm looking at my work now, it is so different, and it's changed greatly, and I love what I do now. Not that I didn't. I think that was a great learning process. You know, struggling is part of it. You know, and I wouldn't say hard. I'd say more so that it was challenging than hard, because I had to think about that whole process in a different way. And now when I'm working, my thought process is totally different on how I'm looking at things. I'm able to, I was very moved and humbled by a friend who is an absolutely beautiful painter. And he said, I'm stuck, Roz, I'm just stuck. I need you to come. So I actually went to his studio and we talked about the whole thing, and I'm like, I'm moving into a totally different realm. But it was lovely to be able to have a conversation and give a different viewpoint. So I think it's not necessarily hard, I think it's just challenging. But I think once you keep working on that, you're gonna find your own niche. And finding your own mark. I think every artist has their own mark. You know, I've had work in people's houses and someone said, hey Roz, I went to this person's house and I think your painting was there. And I said, my painting's hanging on their wall. They went, I knew it was. You have a mark. Jerry, his work, there's a mark. I can look at, I'm like, that's his work. Or Betsy's work. Or somebody, you know, another artist, there's a specific mark that they leave. It's the way they paint, you know, so.
I had a question about kind of how you have evolved in the time that I've known you. And I was thinking about your paintings that you had. Remember the show you had in Rocky Mount?
Yes.
And the paintings that were in that show compared to the paintings in this show are really very different in a lot of ways, but some of the same style type things.
Yeah.
So do you think, what would you comment on your evolution of painting?
I think I've grown in it. I think the more you work, I mean, I go to work every day, and I'm at work and I love my job, but I'm always thinking, oh God, I want to get this done. And I'm always thinking about what I want to do when I get home. I got to get into the studio. I want to try to get at least 2 hours in at the studio. That's my goal, because working full time, running a household, and you know, it's like, when do I fit that in? So my goal is just to at least get 2 hours in, just to work. And I think that's really the key, is just keep going and just being involved in your work, in your craft.
Something that strikes me is that, and Brianna asked like how long the painting would take. What's the oldest painting here?
The oldest painting?
And when was that?
Maybe 6 years ago.
6 years ago. And are these, and what's the newest thing? That.
That's the newest painting, and then I finished this
Would you say
group
that-
of 4 right before I did that.
So this painting from 6 years ago, well, I thought the majority of these were pretty recent.
Yes, that's just the oldest one.
So there's 40 paintings here. 40 paintings, and most of them were done within the last couple of years.
Yes.
Right? So is that like an outlier being 6 years old?
Yeah.
So just think about that, 40 paintings. You know, that's a lot of paintings to do in a few years. You know, the time element is part of it, but also the production of the work, the hard work that you put in is another thing. And by working on so many paintings, you go through, so the changes that show that Rosalind is talking about was how many years ago? I don't know.
Rocky Mount, so I've left, I guess 4 years ago maybe? About 4.
So in 4 years, you've transitioned a bit, but you've done probably most of these paintings in that time.
Right. And these are paintings that I have here. Other paintings have already sold, or they've been shown in other galleries, or things of that sort. Yeah. But I think it's just a continual thing of working on craft.
Keep working.
Yeah, just keep working. And I also don't just work to, oh, I got to work this, I want to sell that. I work because I want to work. And I happen to put work in. If it sells, that's great. If it speaks to people, that's great. You know, but I do love getting my work out. So I feel like it's an honor and a privilege to have my work here at PH.
Guys, have a question? Jacob? Question? And Harriet, if you have questions, answers.
I say wash or stuff, and she not say how.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So you know, the point of this thing about the last few years, remember, with every painting that you do, you're going to learn something, and you're going to grow, and your ability's going to improve. But we're talking about 40 paintings here. You know, you guys have mostly finished one now, so you know it takes a while, and just as a matter of you know referencing again that cloth, that hibiscus cloth that was very challenging. What I'm trying to do is to teach you how to have control over paint. And challenging things like that, you may not paint like that anymore, but I hope at least.
But I learned so much from that painting.
Yeah, I'd like to hope that you learned some control.
Yes.
That you then take with you to do the thing that you more want.
Oh, yes, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. I love what I do. I love to paint. If I had my druthers, that's all I'd want to do. I just want to be in the studio painting. You know, every day, all day, that's it. That would be a dream life.
That's right.
Yes.
So wait, you mean you did not know how to paint at all before you started class?
I painted a little bit, but no, technically, no. I did a lot of mixed media. I did a lot of collage. I do a lot of that. Yeah, rip and tear and using different mediums. Using paint with that too, but using acrylics for that. Not oils. I had not worked with oils at all. So it wasn't until I got here, really, and took the painting class. Yep, took my art classes. Charcoal, you know, the magnolia pod. I love that. Yes?
Do you have a social media for your art that you follow?
I don't have a social media. I do have Instagram, and my work is on Blue Raven Studio, BLEU, Raven Studio, and you can go ahead and follow my work there.
Yeah, I'll put that up. That's a good question.
Yeah.
It's really fun. It's a good Instagram follow. Yeah, that's good.
Yes,
So do you do this for fun or it's like a business? You sell them?
I do sell.
Oh.
And I do show. So I sell here, and a lot of my patrons are here in Virginia. Yeah. So this group here, that is actually, I have patrons that are in Rocky Mount, and she's a physician, and they have actually quite a few of my paintings and my works. I have two here. This one purchased, she's in Arkansas, and this one is in Rocky Mount. And then this one here, that grouping here that's very abstract, that group is in Arkansas. So, and I did do something a little different with some of my work. This grouping here behind Professor Bannon, oil and cold wax, but I also used oil pastel, which was added, and I really like the way that melded together. So, yeah.
So you can just paint something out of like your imagination, I guess.
Yeah.
And just paint.
But it's being aware and seeing something that you really like, and then keeping that thought process, keeping that in your mind, and then sketching it out, or just working it out, or trying to paint it.
Sketch it out. You should use it on the brush.
Yes. Oh, when you're on your canvas, sketching, yeah. I do that too. So any of these, they've all, what you've done on the canvas with a little terp in your oil to draw that out, I do the same thing.
Can you draw him?
Huh?
Can you draw him, paint him?
I'm not a portrait person.
Oh, that's different from
That's different. Yeah.
After you get your ground perfect, what's the next thing you do?
I go ahead and use my terp and oil, draw my thing out.
Yeah. What color do you use?
I use red.
I
I use red. And I have 4 3x3 paintings that I'm getting ready to do abstract landscapes on, but very minimal. And those are red. Taped red wash.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I'll use my brush and I'll my line of what I want to do, and then I'll go from there. Yep, red is it. Are you having a problem with that?
They always do, everybody
Yeah.
does. They're always complaining about the red paint. I always think to start with red paint.
Well, you know, I did that. When I was in Rocky Mount, I had my studio in Rocky Mount, and I was teaching, and I did the white study, and the white study on red. That's lovely.
You think you learned something from that?
Oh my gosh, I love it. I still use it.
You
I-
now use that in teaching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. I use it in teaching.
There's a lot that you can learn.
Because part of the process, and even with my clients, because sometimes they want to rush through, and I say, art is and I'll say, what is art? It's a process, right? Take your time. I don't want you to rush through something. I would much rather it take a week or more to finish than finishing it one day. Because it's going to change by the time, you know, your thought process is going to change. You're going to add to or take away from. Keep going, red's good.
So that's really wonderful sharing that you've given us, and we learned a lot about the process and about art. And so I'd like for everybody, if you would join me, to thank Roz once again. And I have some
It
lovely
was
art
my
gifts
pleasure.
for
My
you.
pleasure.
Just a little grab bag here of items that you can, and some other smaller
Oh,
things.
thank you.
As a token of our appreciation
Thank you.
for coming and sharing your work with
I
us for
loved
these
it.
past few weeks and your time today.
I had the best time coming here. You are very lucky to be able to come here. It's a wonderful college.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
You
you.
guys are gonna